Hey Leo, I am so sorry that you have not been feeling well. We've missed you in class. Obviously, I am not in class because my son had to quarantine, but Mr. Cooper is, and I am Zooming in every day. So I'm just going to go over what we've been doing in class. Okay. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to open up a Google Doc because we're going to set up your paper today. Okay. So you've already done your outline. I've looked at your outline. It looks really, really good. I gave you a suggestion on your thesis statement. So now what we're going to do is you are going to set your paper up with me. So yours looks just like mine in terms of a cover page and then getting your paper started. So you're going to go to a new document and you're going to click on Google Docs. And then we'll wait for that to load, and then I'll go through all the steps with you. So I'm just going to go through the last couple days of class so that you are confident when you come back. I'm sorry it took me a little while to get this to you. My tablet was not working with Screencastify, but now it is. All right, we are going to go ahead and we're going to title our document, Your Last Name, Paper 1. So it's going to look like this, Pearson, Paper 1. Okay, I did that. Pearson, sorry about that. So your last name, colons, paper 1. All right. And now we're going to go ahead and make our cover page. And our cover page is just going to be a part of our paper. So you're going to center a line. Okay. And then you're going to remind yourself that just like my example paper, you need a picture that connects to your topic. Okay, and that's going to go right here on the cover page. And then you're going to enter down, and then you're going to have a title, any font, and size. It's probably going to be self-harm, okay, because that's your topic. So that'll be your title. And once again, we are just using my example paper to follow along. If I can find it here. I'll just have to, there it is. So using my example paper right here to make yours and mine look the same in terms of formatting. So just to show you again, you should have my example paper at home. If you don't yet, we'll make sure that Mr. Cooper gets that to you. All right, so my internet's a little slow today and I'm sorry for that. So I've got my picture that's loading. I have my title, any font and size. And now we are going to go ahead and write down below your name, okay? English 2, 4th hour, Mr. Cooper / Mrs. Cooper. And then the due date of this paper, which is March 2nd, 2021. But you're going to write it like this, 2 March 2021. Okay. Now, once you put your picture on here and you add your title, you can kind of manipulate the rest of your cover page so that it looks like my example as it loads. Okay. And so to look like my example, you'll notice that I've got my picture, I've got my title page, and then I go right into my paper. So let's go ahead and do that. We've got our cover page all loaded and ready to go. We're going to go ahead and enter down to our first page of information that's going to have our introduction and all of our body paragraphs. Okay, so we'll enter. Oh my goodness. My internet. I am so sorry. It's kind of ridiculous today. Alrighty. Okay. So we are on our next page. One thing I want to remind you is going back up to your cover page real quick. Come on. Make sure that your paper information right here is Times New Roman, size 12. So go back up here and make sure you select Times New Roman and then size 12. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, and then size 12. Okay, so we're going to go back down to our next page. And we are going to click Insert Page Numbers. And you're going to click the top right option, this one right here that shows a cover page. And then your first page of information has a page number on it. So you're going to click that one. Once again, Insert Page Numbers, top right. Okay. You're going to put your cursor right before that number and you're going to type in your last name and have a space. Okay. Then you're going to click out. You're going to left align. You're going to make sure you are at Times New Roman and size 12. And you are going to make sure you are double spacing. And then you can tab in and you can start your introduction. Okay? So if you need to kind of go back through my instructions again, you totally can. What I'm going to do now is once you've got your paper set up, I'm going to talk to you about introductions, okay? So your introduction needs to be 5 sentences long. And I'm going to go by step how you would write those sentences so you have the best introduction, okay? And then I'm going to show you a student example introduction. So here's my slide from Monday. To write an introduction, you should start with a hook, an interesting fact about your topic, a statistic about self-harm, a quote about self-harm, maybe a definition of self-harm. That's how you'll start your paper, with an interesting hook sentence. Then you are going to have 3 transitional sentences, moving your reader from your hook to your thesis. Where do you find these 3 sentences? Well, you're going to look at your body paragraph Roman numerals in your outline, and you're going to summarize them. So you're going to look at Roman numeral 2, and you're going to summarize it. You don't want to be too specific, though. You want to be more of a summary of Roman numeral 2, a summary of Roman numeral 3, and a summary of Roman numeral 4. For example, if Roman numeral 2 is all about treatment for self-harm, you may say there are many different treatments for self-harm. If Roman numeral 3 is all about causes of self-harm, you may say, although every individual is different, there are a variety of similar causes for self-harm. So your introduction should not be super specific, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. And then you'll end with your thesis statement. So you'll have 1 sentence that's a hook, and you might have to cite it because it might be a fact, and you have to cite it from your resources. Then you have 3 sentences that summarize your outline, and then you have 1 sentence that's your thesis statement. So you end up with 5 sentences all together. So let's look at my example introduction. My red sentence is my hook, and I've cited it. It is estimated that approximately 1% of children under the age of 5 have been diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder in the United States. And then I cite that resource because that's not my own common knowledge. Reactive attachment disorder, or RAD, is a psychiatric condition with a variety of symptoms. So my Roman numeral 2 was about symptoms, so I summarized that. Unlike many psychiatric conditions, though, RAD is usually diagnosed within an individual's first years of life. My Roman numeral 3 was about diagnosis, so I summarized it, but I didn't get too specific. If you get too specific and you start giving me numbers and statistics, then you have to cite it. Although it can be identified during an early period of life, there is no cure for RAD. So my 4th Roman numeral is about cures and treatments. And then I end with my thesis. Individuals who are severely neglected as infants may develop reactive attachment disorder, leading to a variety of permanent problems later in life. So that's my example introduction. We've set up your paper, and I've kind of talked to you about introductions, but I'm going to show you Maddie Cooksey's introduction because I feel like it's a really good example. So let's see here. I put it on here, and so here is her outline. Her paper is over claustrophobia, okay? So she's got her thesis statement. She's got her Roman numerals, the basics of claustrophobia, the causes, and the symptoms and treatment, okay? So let's see how she wrote her introduction. She set up her paper. She's got her title. She's got her information. And let's see what she's done. So she starts with a really good question hook. Have you ever been stuck in an elevator? For individuals who suffer from claustrophobia, this type of event could be anxiety-ridden. So that's her hook. She's got a 2-sentence hook, and that's okay because she's connecting it to the rest of her paragraph. So then she defines claustrophobia from Roman numeral 2. Claustrophobia is a common phobia of being confined or trapped in a small or crowded space with an assortment of symptoms. And because this was so specific, she did cite it, and that's okay. You can have one citation in your introduction. She then summarizes her third Roman numeral. Claustrophobia can be diagnosed at a young age, but usually it is caused by some type of traumatic experience having to do with a small space. Then she summarizes her last body paragraph. Treatments and cures have successfully been found for claustrophobia, making it easier to cope with. And she ends with her thesis statement. Although a small amount of population suffers from claustrophobia, it is a serious disorder that can be treated. So Maddie has a great introduction. She starts with her hook, okay? And then she summarizes her 3 body paragraphs, not too specifically. When she does get specific, she does cite it. And then she has her thesis statement. So once again, she had her hook, and then she summarized Roman numeral 2, and then she summarized Roman numeral 3, and then she summarized Roman numeral 4. So just a reminder to you, that is what you need to do for your introduction. So that was step 1 in Monday's process. So we set up our papers, and then we did our introductions, okay? So that was step 1. The second thing I want to talk to you about is citations. You know that you have to cite your sources. And in your Pathfinder, you wrote down how you would cite your sources if you had to write your paper. So today, we're just going to talk a little bit about citing sources, and I'm going to show you what a well-written cited paper looks like, okay? So, why citing is important. Alrighty. So waiting for that to load. You are going to get a copy of these notes. They are in the classroom, and if you return to class, Mr. Cooper can get you these. This is all for you to keep, and it just goes through when to cite, how to cite, things like that. So just to kind of look at my paper while my notes load, you will notice that I had my introduction, and now I have my first body paragraph, okay? I'm going to start my first body paragraph with an opening sentence. Reactive attachment disorder, or RAD, is characterized as a psychiatric illness. Also known as post-traumatic disorder, RAD is one of the few disorders listed in the DSM that can be applied to infants. And then I cite this source right in the middle of the sentence because this information came from this source that didn't have an author but had an article title and page numbers. And this information came from this article. So sometimes you have to cite in the middle of a sentence. The DSM, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Medical Disorders, is a handbook that contains symptoms and descriptions for all the mental disorders. This handbook helps doctors diagnose patients. And I cited that information because that's not from my brain. All of my info, all of my research needs to be cited, whether I put it in my own words or not. RAD is usually diagnosed between the ages of 2 months and 5 years old, depending on the severity. Citation. Although reactive attachment disorder can be difficult to diagnose, the causes and prevalence is well documented. So I end my body paragraph with a closing sentence. So we're going to talk about citing today. Alrighty. I'm going to skip a couple of these slides because it just talks about noodle tools, and you've already learned about noodle tools with Mrs. Bachfischer. So now I'm just going to talk about why citing is important and when you need to cite. So we'll skip a little bit, and we're going to start with citing formatting. Okay. Make sure whenever you cite in your paper that the period always goes after your citation. A period never goes before the citation, ever, 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 always after. If you are quoting material, let's say you have awesome material and you cannot put it into your own words, it's like the best material ever, you're going to do your quotation, start your quotation, end your quotation, then put your citation and your end mark after the citation, okay? Always after, always period after. And if you don't have an author, be sure that when you cite your resources, if it is an article title, that you put it in quotation marks, how it looks in your noodle tools. For example, let's say your article title is super, super long, like piracy takes heavy human toll in South Africa. Well, what I want you to do is avoid articles with names that long. So shorten it to the first 4 words only when you cite it in your paper. It makes your paper look cleaner, and so it doesn't look like you have a ton of citations everywhere. So if you have an article that's got a super long title, shorten it to the first 4 words when you cite it in your paper. You do have a print source that you have to use in your paper. And when you use that print source, when you're citing it, when you're using information from your print source, you need to use page numbers. But with websites and online encyclopedias and databases, you do not have to use page numbers, just with your book. If you have any articles that have the same title, you have to let Mr. Cooper and I know when you cite in your paper which information came from this article and which from this. And they're both titled the same thing, Lucille Ball. So when this happens, you're going to add the next distinguishing item from the works cited entry to the article title to show me the difference. So you would put Lucille Ball, encyclopedia, Lucille Ball, bio. And you'll notice encyclopedia is italicized because it's italicized up here. Bio is italicized because it's italicized right there. So these are just tips and tricks for when you are citing in your paper. Few things to remember when you are writing your paper: don't overquote information. Try to put things into your own words as much as possible. If you find info that's just so beautifully written that you couldn't put it in your own words yourself, make sure that you quote it and that you cite right after the quotation. That's the rule. If you quote information, you have to cite right after the citation. If you put information in your own words, you can chunk it according to which resource you use. I'll talk about that in a second. For example, the young Crown Prince Henry was more concerned with matters of sport. It was even said he could draw the bow with greater strength than any man in England. See how my person cited right after that quotation? And then they continue. He was physically talented and succeeded in many popular sports of the day. So they put that last sentence into their own words, and then they cited it at the end. You're not going to have a citation probably after every single sentence, but we're going to talk about when to cite information. So when do I cite information? Well, You cite information when you switch sources. Let's say you have a chunk of information from one source. When you're done with that source, you have to cite it and move on. You also need to cite when you change page numbers from the same source. So if you have info from pages 15 through 17, and then you have info from pages 20 to 23, you have to cite 15 through 17, and then you have to separately cite 22 to 23. Also, you have to remember every time you start a new paragraph, you have to restart your citations. You can't have a body paragraph and cite in it, and then your next body paragraph you just forget. Just a reminder, if you have a chunk of a paragraph from the same source and page, then you can cite at the end of the chunk. If you have a chunk of information from one source, but then you change to another, you got to finish out that source and then you can move on. For example, the red information is, in my own words, from this resource. This author's last name is Water, and the page number is 1336. This yellow information, I paraphrased, and it was from this resource, Henry VIII, on 184. The yellow information is from an article, the green information is from an article, and so I cited at the end because I'm done with that resource. And then this whole chunk of info is from this resource, so I cited it at the very end. You'll notice this whole chunk I cited at the very end. That's a lot of information. You don't have to cite after every sentence if it all came from the same resource and you didn't use any quotations. You used all your own words. You still have to cite it, but you can wait till you're done with the resource to cite it. So last rules about citations. You must cite after every direct quote, even if the citation immediately before or after is the same source and page number. You have to cite every time you quote material. You must restart your citing at the beginning of each each paragraph, even if the citation at the end of the paragraph before is the same source. Punctuation always goes after the citation. And remember, do not quote more than 4 lines of information. Don't take a whole chunk out of one of your resources and just put it in your paper. That's called a block quote, and we don't do block quotes until we're writing 6 to 8 page papers. And finally, don't span more than 3 pages when citing. If you have information from pages 1 through 3 in one part and 4 through 10 in another, you have to divide it up. You can't just say this whole paragraph is from pages 23 to 84. You have to cite every 3 pages. So this presentation, Mr. Cooper is going to give you a copy of these notes, okay? We also did an activity where we practiced our citations, but I would rather see how you do. I think you're very sharp. I think you understand things quickly, especially when I show you examples. So as you begin writing your paper, you need to make sure that you have your outline and that you're following it and that you're citing your resources in a way that is appropriate. So once again, showing you my example body paragraph. I started with an opening sentence. Reactive attachment disorder, or RAD, is characterized as a psychiatric illness, also known as post-traumatic disorder. I got that from this resource, okay? And that is different than this resource. So I have to cite in the middle of a sentence, and then I continue. RAD is one of the few disorders listed in the DSM that can be applied to infants. Citation. And I cited that because my next set of information, Leo, is from this resource. So I have to end this citation, do this citation, and then I have a new citation, flipping back, and then I have my closing sentence, which should never be cited because your closing and opening sentences should just introduce your reader to the paragraph and wrap up the paragraph moving into the next one. So see how I wrapped up my paragraph? Although reactive attachment disorder can be difficult to diagnose, the causes and prevalence is well documented. So then this body paragraph is going to be all about causes and prevalence. So you're going to start working on your introduction, and then you're going to share your introduction with me over Google Classroom, okay? So just a reminder, when you go to Google Classroom, you will notice that I have an assignment for you called Introduction, okay? You've already turned in your outline. Now you're going to be submitting your introduction, and you'll see that kids just loaded their introduction or their paper to Google Classroom, and I graded it for 10 points. I am not worried. I don't think you're going to get too far behind, but I wanted to make this Screencastify video for you just to help you and support you any way I could. I'll go ahead and stop the Screencastify for today. And then if you are back in class, Mr. Cooper can help you with anything you need, as well as Mrs. McKenzie. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. I miss you. Okay. Doop.